The mistake that so many of God's people make is that they think that human relationships can fill the deep void inside, a void that is so deep that it can only be filled by God Himself. And so they end up living out their lives based on a second best when God's very best is right under their noses. Hi, I'm Berni Dymet. Welcome again to the program. On Christianityworks this week, we're looking at the third message in a series that I've called God's Very Best for You. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been looking at the idolatry that ruins our lives, the idolatry that robs us of God's very best. Now, some people have physical idols in their lives, and if you have a physical idol, some god, some idol in your life, do yourself a favour right now, pick it up, go outside, throw it in the bin and get rid of it out of your life. But you see, for most people it's not that easy, because for most of us, our idols aren't physical things, they're emotional things and they're spiritual things. An idol is anything that we elevate above God in our lives. There are some bad things that people elevate above God: gambling, illicit sex, drugs, all that sort of stuff. Beating their wives, theft, dishonesty. Some people elevate those things in their lives and make idols of them. But many people, including many Christians, take good things, blessings from God, and elevate them above God. They take their career, they take family, they take wealth, they take a whole bunch of things and elevate them above God. We saw last week on the program from Genesis chapter 22 how Abraham took his son Isaac, who was a huge blessing from God. After waiting 25 years, by the time he was 100, Isaac was finally born to Abraham and Sarah. So they were doting over him, and somehow they managed to elevate this huge blessing from God and take the blessing and put it above God. And let's not kid ourselves. Even though it was good, even though it was a blessing, when you take that good blessing and you elevate it above God, it becomes an idol. And idols are always imposters. Idols never deliver what you expected them to deliver. I remember a few years ago, I was travelling for ministry in South Africa. I was speaking at a conference in South Africa, and I once went to a store not far from the conference centre, and I was looking for a present for my daughter. She was, a teenager at the time, and I thought I'd love to get something really nice for her. So I saw a Louis Vuitton handbag. Now, I quizzed the woman in the shop. I said, "Is this a real Louis Vuitton handbag?" She guaranteed absolutely it was. And so it was a bit more than I wanted to spend, but I loved my daughter, and so I bought this Louis Vuitton handbag for her, which I brought home, and she was absolutely delighted in. She used it and used it and used it, and all of a sudden, after about 18 months, the catch broke. Not a problem. There was a Louis Vuitton authorised dealer near where I lived, so I took the bag into the authorised dealer and said, "This Louis Vuitton handbag has broken, can you please repair it?" And the woman there took a look and said, "I'm sorry, that's a fake handbag. It's not a real Louis Vuitton handbag." See, that's what happens with fakes, with imposters. They don't work. They don't deliver what you expected. Ultimately, they break. I want to take you back to Exodus chapter 20, verses 2 to 6. And let's just remind ourselves what God has to say about these imposters, because He loves you so much. He wants you to have His very best rather than this world's second best, which will never deliver. "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery." God wants you to be free. God doesn't want you to be enslaved to the things of this world. He wants you to be free. And He said, "You shall not have any other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol, whether in the form of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing children for the iniquity of their parents to the third or fourth generation of those who reject me, but showing steadfast love to the 1,000th generation for those who love me and keep my commandments. You see, there's a rejection there. When we make an idol out of something good or bad in our lives and we elevate it above God and we sacrifice our lives to it and we worship it with our lives, what we are effectively doing is we are rejecting God. That's what this says. And when we reject God, we reject the God who sent Jesus Christ, His one and only Son, to suffer on that cross for you and for me. He loved us so much. Jesus died for us. That's what we're rejecting when we place anything above God in our lives. What I'd like to do today is talk about the 3 most common idols in our lives. I remember when I was back at theological college, one of our lecturers, Dr. Barry Chant, he was actually the president of the college, taught a class on the 3 things that most commonly lead ministers astray from their calling. And as it turns out, these 3 things are the most common idols that we see in people's lives today. He put it quite simply: girls, gold, and glory. Well, girls, or if you happen to be a girl, guys, gold and glory. Let's look at this whole girls and guys thing. It's the most natural thing in the world. Boy meets girl, they fall in love, they get married, they have children, and hopefully they live happily ever after. Well, not all marriages are like that. Marriage can be really, really hard. Marriage is about sacrifice. But I know that when you're young and you meet that one person and you fall in love with them and you want to spend the rest of your life with them, it is so easy for that relationship to draw you aside from your relationship with God. We make that person the most important person in our lives. Great. They should be the most important person. But all of a sudden it's easy to be so euphoric about that relationship that we push God out of the equation. That's one way of making an idol out of girls or guys, as the case may be. Another way, and a lot of people do this, is through sexual promiscuity. Sexual promiscuity is now a lifestyle amongst so many people, young and old, married and unmarried. It's sad to see where the world is going. And when we take that pleasure and we elevate it above what God's Word says about the role and the place of physical intimacy between a man and a woman, however we pervert that, we are committing idolatry. Listen to what God's Word says on this. Ephesians chapter 5 verse 3, "But fornication and impurity of any kind or greed must not even be mentioned among you, as is proper amongst the saints. Entirely out of place is obscene, silly and vulgar talk, but instead let there be thanksgiving. Be sure of this, that no fornicator or impure person or one who is greedy, that is, an idolater, has any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and of God." So, this whole guys and girls thing is an area where many people fall astray. It's fantastic. I love my wife. She's the most beautiful woman in the world to me, and I couldn't imagine my life without her. But God is my number one, and I know that when God is my number one, I am so much a better husband to my wife and a better father to my children. I ask you to think about your relationship with the woman in your life or the man in your life, as the case may be, and ask you to think, have you elevated this person above God in your life? Because if you have, you'll be a worse husband or a worse wife. That's the first thing. And secondly, you'll be guilty of idolatry. And if you're into sexual promiscuity, listen to what God's Word says here. The physical intimacy is a gift from God, and its one and only place is in a lifelong relationship between a man and a woman, in that sublime relationship that's anointed by God that we call marriage. So, girls, guys, is the first area in which many people fall into idolatry. The second one is gold. Let's have a look at this whole gold thing. Of course, wealth has been around for a long time. We talked a couple of weeks ago about the golden calf that was fashioned by Israel while Moses was up on Mount Sinai getting the 10 Commandments. They took wealth, they took gold, and they fashioned it into an idol, and they worshipped it. And in this day and age, here in the 21st century, so many people worship wealth. They worship what money can buy. Money buys a lot of things. Money buys lifestyle, it buys comfort, it buys reputation, it buys choice, it buys holidays, it buys relaxation. Money buys a whole bunch of things. But surprisingly, none of the things that money can buy ever truly fill that void that only God can fill. I want to take you now to Psalm 135, and let's listen to what God says about turning wealth into an idol. Psalm 135, beginning at verse 15. The idols of the nations are silver and gold, the work of human hands. They have mouths but do not speak. They have eyes but do not see. They have ears but do not hear. And there is no breath in their mouths. Those who make them and all those who trust them shall become like them. Let's translate that into our 21st century life, where we don't actually build physical idols, where we make idols out of all the different choices and pleasures that this world has to offer. What he's saying there is that the idols may have eyes but they can't see. They have ears but they can't hear. They have mouths but they can't speak. Idols are actually useless when it comes to guiding your life and talking about the important things in your life. The wisdom that comes from God doesn't come from idols. Come on, how much is wealth an idol in your life? How much is the desire for gold an idol in your life? I recently had a painter come into my house to paint a room for me, because I'm a terrible painter. And he was telling me about a house that he'd worked in. It was a $35 million mansion on Sydney Harbour, owned by two elderly people. The house was so big that they only occupied a small part of it and the rest was empty. These two people were desperately unhappy in their lives. And it was a street where there was always arguing and anger between the neighbours. And he made the observation, this painter, he said, they've got everything and they're just not happy. Now, that's the picture that's painted here in Psalm 135. Come on, wealth can't make you happy. And yet in this world, we're sold this lie that it can. How much are you sacrificing your emotional energy, your resources, your time, your life to the pursuit of wealth? And if you are doing that, let me ask you, truly, deep down inside, how happy, how fulfilled, how contented is your wealth actually making you? I want to leave you with that question. We're going to come to a short break now, and when we come back, we're going to pursue that question a little bit more deeply and see what God has to say about the idolatry of wealth in our lives here and now in the 21st century. Friend, I know God has an amazing plan for you. And in fact, the reason that I do what I do here on the Christianityworks program and our team that supports me behind the scenes, the reason we do what we do is to bring the victory of God into your life. And I'd like to ask you for something. I'd like to ask you to support Christianityworks. We're not some big, massive, wealthy ministry. We're rather a small ministry who work pretty lean, and yet we're able to reach millions of people with the good news of Jesus Christ each week around the globe through these broadcasts. 160 countries, 1,300 radio and television stations, but we can only do that with the support of friends like you. Our contact details are on the screen right now. Let me encourage you to give a generous gift of support to keep Christianityworks on air here on your station and right around the globe so that we can touch many, many more lives and see the victory of Jesus come into their life. Thank you so much for your support. It means so much to so many people around the world. So let me ask you, how much do you dream, how much of your daydreaming time do you spend dreaming about being wealthy? Do you have this fantasy of winning it big in the lotto or the lottery or through some big inheritance and having so much money that you can jet around the world all the time and travel wherever you want and have servants? And do you fantasize about being wealthy a lot? You'd be amazed how many people actually do. Life is a drudgery sometimes, and we're going through work and commuting and doing all the things that we do in life. And yet there's this parallel universe that goes on where people are fantasizing about being mega wealthy, super wealthy, so wealthy that they'll never, ever, ever have to think or worry about money ever again, that they'll be able to exercise any choice that they want to exercise, have anything they want, be anyone they want, go anywhere they want, do anything they want. I don't know what the statistics are, but many, many, many people carry that fantasy around in their heads. Even people who love Jesus. Even people who want to serve Jesus, and yet they're torn. They're torn between wealth and God. I wonder if that's you. Listen to what we see here in 1 Timothy chapter 6, beginning at verse 9. Those who want to be rich fall into temptation and are trapped by many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, and in their eagerness to be rich, some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pains. I relate to that. I lived the first 36 years of my life like that. I desired wealth. I sacrificed my life to this idol of wealth, and I pierced myself with so many pains. I always lived beyond my means. I was always in debt. I was always struggling. I always wanted more. I was never satisfied. Enough was never enough. That's the sign in a person's life that wealth has become an idol. Jesus put it very simply like this. He said in Matthew chapter 6, verse 24, "No one can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth." Very stark choice. Does God bless some people with wealth? Yeah, I know some people who are blessed with wealth, and those people ultimately are always the people that God blesses, who have the capacity to deal with that wealth and who have the capacity to be generous with the wealth that God has given them. God hasn't blessed me with a huge amount of wealth. By a global standard, I'm blessed, I'm comfortable, I have a home where I live in, I have enough food on my table, I have those things. But I don't think God will ever make me mega wealthy, because I don't think I would be able to cope with that sort of a wealth. And praise God that He wouldn't let me be distracted from my relationship with Him and my calling that He's put on my life. So if wealth is an idol, wake up. Wealth can never deliver. Gold can never deliver what you're looking for. Okay, we've spoken about guys and girls, we've spoken about gold. It's now time to talk about glory. We all want to be affirmed. We all want to be recognized. That's gone to the extreme these days. Everybody's a publisher. Everybody's out there on Facebook or on Twitter or on whatever social medium there is, telling the world about themselves. Ask any young teenager and they all want to be a famous something, a famous tennis player, a famous rock star, a famous whatever it is. We want recognition. We want people to affirm us. And in a sense, that's natural and that's good. Children, as they're growing up, are recognized and affirmed by their parents, by their teachers, by other adults. It's good that we establish our identity that way. But now all of a sudden this has gone to an extreme where everybody wants to get glory. Some people live for glory. Now, in a sense, that's natural. Some personality types more than others require recognition. If you read Romans chapter 12, verses 4 to 8, you'll see in there 7 motivational giftings. We're not going to go there right now, but there's 7 motivational giftings. Each one of us primarily is one of those, and we have a secondary one as well in that list. I wrote a book, My Personality GPS, all about the personality types in Romans chapter 12, verses 4 to 8. And what I discovered is that certain personality types thrive more on recognition. For instance, people who are good salesmen or saleswomen, in a sales team, there's often competition and rewards and achievements and medals and gifts and prizes. Why? Because the sorts of personalities attracted to the sales role need more recognition. That's just naturally how they are. All of that is fine to a point, until our lives revolve around getting glory, until our lives revolve around getting recognition from other people, until that becomes the intoxicating thing that we live and breathe for. And I know that there are some people watching today who are stumbling in this form of idolatry. idolizing glory and recognition and reputation and career above everything else, and including above God. I wonder if you know anyone like that. One of the astounding things about Jesus, when he came to be on this earth with us, even though he was the Son of God, even though through him, by the power of the Holy Spirit, God did some incredible things on this earth, healing the blind and the lame, and the amazing miracles that Jesus performed, and the power and the authority with which he proclaimed the Word of God amongst God's people. Despite all of that, when Jesus came to this world, he laid his glory aside. Jesus is the eternal Son of God. Through him, everything which was created was indeed created. Nothing was created apart from Jesus. So Jesus is the creator of the universe. He becomes a man. He lays all his glory aside. Have a listen about some of the things that he says about glory. John chapter 5, verse 41. He says, I do not accept glory from human beings, but I know that you do not have the love of God in you. I have come in my Father's name, and you do not accept me. So Jesus says, hang on, I'm not here to lord it over you. I'm not here to be glorified by you. I don't want your glory. Jesus was a rock star. Thousands of people followed him and listened to him and saw the miracles he performed. And he said, I do not accept glory from you. I'm not going to let this go to my head. John chapter 8, verse 54. Jesus answered, if I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. It is my Father who glorifies me, he of whom you say, he is our God. So Jesus is saying, I'm not here to talk myself up. I'm not going to say things to try and build myself up in your perceptions. I'm not going to glorify myself. Look at what God's doing through me. Look at what my Father's doing through me. Look at the miracles that he is performing through me, and let him glorify me. So many people spend their lives talking themselves up, always wanting to be popular, always wanting to make themselves look bigger and appear bigger to other people. And then eventually, a lot of the people who were following Jesus didn't like what he was saying, because Jesus taught some very difficult things. Jesus said some very difficult things. Just as on this program, we talk about some tough stuff. We talk about difficult things, and maybe some people want to turn it off. It's too hard. I don't want to hear that. But Jesus never shied away from talking about the difficult things. And in John chapter 6, verse 66, this is what we discover. Because of this, because of all the difficult things he talked about, many of his disciples turned back and no longer went about with him. Was Jesus fazed by that? Did Jesus run around and try and get them all back? Not at all. Because what was important to him was not what other people thought of him. It was fulfilling the mission that his Father in heaven had given him to fulfill on this earth. And finally, my favourite one, John chapter 2 and verse 24. But Jesus, on his part, would not entrust himself to them, because he knew all people, and he needed no one to testify about anyone, for he himself knew what was in everyone. In other words, he knew the crowds were fickle. He knew that public opinion was fickle. He knew that people would try and glorify him for their own ends. And remember, when he came into Jerusalem on that last Passover, and he was riding on the donkey, and they were all throwing down palm leaves and shouting, Hosanna in the highest, and worshipping him. That very same crowd, only a few days later, was shaking their fists in front of Pontius Pilate, saying, crucify him. And that's the problem if we live for the idol of glory. Because the people out there are fickle. They do have their own agendas. They themselves are sinners, just like you and me. If we rely on their recognition and their glory in order to live our lives, it's like going down to the fairground and looking in one of those distorted mirrors that completely gives you the wrong image of yourself. You see how these three idols that we've talked about today, girls and guys, gold, and glory, rob you of life? They take away God's very best for you, and they replace that with a best, second best, or third best, or fourth best. And that's exactly what the devil wants. The devil does not want you to live in God's very best. And next week on the program, we're going to look at exactly what God's very best for you actually looks like and tastes like and smells like and feels like. But right now, I just encourage you to be honest with yourself, to be honest with God, to look in the mirror, to say, you know what, I've heard Berni on the television today. He's talked about these three idols: girls, gold, and glory. And one of those, at least one of those maybe, is an idol in your life. Father, idols have such power over us. They're the power of the devil, the power to steal, kill, and destroy. The enemy, we know, doesn't want us to live in your very best. Father, we've heard your word today. We've heard what Jesus has said about idolatry, what you said through Moses about idolatry. Father, we turn our lives over to you and we repent. We want to say sorry for our idolatry. We give everything to you, and we ask you, Father God, that your Holy Spirit, through your word today, would pour power in our hearts to turn away from the idols in our lives. Father, we ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen. May God bless you as you've received His word into your heart today. I've been really excited to share God's word with you today, and we'll be catching up again next week to do exactly the same thing, looking at the last message in this series called Oh God, I Need a Rest. Please don't forget, we can only do what we do here at Christianity Works with the generous support of friends like you. So thank you for getting in touch. Our contact details are right here on the screen, either on the internet or by phone or by mail, and giving a generous gift of support to support this broadcast here on your station and in fact right around the world. It's been great to be with you today. I'm Berni Dymet, and you've been watching Christianity Works. We'll catch you again same time next week as we continue with the last message in this series, Oh God, I Need a Rest. Hey YouTube, if you are blessed through today's message, then click on this button and subscribe to the Christianity Works YouTube channel and continue being blessed and empowered through the Word of God each and every day.